Hello there. Now what do you suppose this might be? Do you think I might be able to play you a tune on it? Do you think it needs strings? It certainly makes a lot of noise. Well, strange gadget this. Never mind, let's have a look and see what it does and how it does it. Any ideas yet? It's interesting, isn't it? Now that must be a pillar drill in the background. So let's get a little bit closer and see if anyone can figure out quite what this does. There we are. So the chuck is vertical and there is a lead screw. We are now sitting in front of the machine mounted in the XY table of the pillar drill. We will just pan gently to the right to see the length of the lead screw. There we go, and just a little bit on the left. If we zoom in on the power head itself, we can see the control module at the bottom left hand corner, the carriage and lead screw, which has the wood thin section clamped to the lead screw carriage. In the background we can see the 24 volt lorry windscreen wiper motor which moves the lead screw. The black knob towards the centre is in fact the speed control for the motor and consequently the speed of the carriage. The small switch on the left is the power on for the module. The switch to the right is the direction switch for the carriage. The motor has a pulley on it which drives through a toothed belt to the lead screw pulley. So once the cutter is started from the 3-jaw chuck mounted above, then with all the alignment correct, the feed is set using the black knob and the direction to the left. So the cutter is rotating and cutting as the lead screw feeds the thin wood section between the guide jaws to the cutter. So we have half round section being fed in and whatever moulding section befitting the cutter coming out the other side. So I will just now move over the top of the device so we can see there is the motor pulley and the motor. It's all low voltage powered, so there is no danger of damaging or hurting oneself electrically. Mechanically, well, that is anybody's guess. So if we just move around the 3-jaw chuck, we can see that the cutter is at the back. There it is, the cutter. I'll just rotate it round. There's the cutting head there. Here we are looking at the back of the cutting head. The tool is in the 3-jawed chuck in the centre of the picture. Now, bearing in mind that the tool rotates at about 1500 RPM, then this is turning all the time as the moulding is being fed in from the left. Now, as we can see, this has already been through once, but each time this rotates, it does a cut across the surface of the wood. And so it will do it in one pass it will turn 1/4 inch doweling into a profiled section, and you can see that it's beginning to just pick up slightly as it cuts. Now this is a very small piece of wood and it has been through once already, so it's important to have the guard in front of this just in case anything should go wrong. So we're at the moment looking at the rear of the cutting head. I will just demonstrate the operation of the lead screw. I will turn the power on and then turn the feed motor on, and the direction switch is to the left. So the carriage is moving to the left and feeding the wood into the cutting tool. This is on the lowest speed setting, and it will increase up to about 4 or 5 times this speed and still maintain a good cut. So we can produce 4 feet, 5 feet of moulding within perhaps less than a minute. You can see that once the carriage reached the end of its travel, it did in fact switch itself off. Now there is an electrical braking system applied to the motor once it trips the micro switch. So on the top of the carriage we have these 2 clamps which hold the small section of wood which we are profiling. I'm just going to engage the lead screw in the reverse direction, preparing for the next cut of another section of wood. So we power on, we need the direction switch to the right, and we can turn up the speed. And it will auto stop once it reaches the other end, which is some distance away. With the power head removed from the drilling machine and placed onto the bench, we can see what it's like from the rear. Now the cutting tool fits in this recess to the right of the guide plates which have the silver screws. Now on the left here we have the motor, which is the windscreen wiper motor, and that drives the toothy belt for the lead screw. Now inside this box, which is mounted underneath the cutting plate where the transformer is, to reduce it down to a much safer voltage. So from an electrical point of view it is quite safe. From a mechanical point of view it's somewhat questionable. So from the rear there is the rear of the carriage, the motor and the power unit to drive the motor. I would just like to point out that this machine is highly dangerous from a mechanical point of view, as the cutter rotates at a very fast pace. So it is enclosed behind this backing plate, which ensures that as long as we stay in front of the device, the cutting head can't come in contact with us. It is extremely powerful and would remove fingers and catch hair extremely easily. So this is something that requires some degree of practice and care. I've been doing this eccentric kind of work for at least 45 years. If we move to the right, we can just see the carriage assembly with the homemade clamps on the top. That is for the feed that feeds the new section of wood into the cutting head through the guides and to engage with the cutter, which is held in the 3-jaw chuck in the pillar drill. All the alignment of the tool to the material going in is maintained because the whole cutting head is mounted in an XYZ table mounted beneath the pillar drill. Just coming into view on the right is my tiny fret saw, which is a fantastic addition to anyone who enjoys making miniature things. So this is a sample of the wood sections and mouldings that I can make for the miniature house. I've put the samples onto this birch ply plate just for demonstration purposes. Now if we zoom in on this one, that is a form of skirting board. Then there is a moulding for, could be coving, picture rail with the bottom edge milled off it. We have skirting board, of which there is miles, chair rail, dado rail, different types of dado rail, and more moulding for the ceiling. Now these all started as rectangular sections of wood, except for the dado rail, which is the one right in the centre of the picture now. That starts with a 2 metre long length of what we used to call half round material. That is this. Now as you can just see from the very end of this, that this is where a piece was cut off after use. Now this is 1/4 inch across and a lot less than half round. If I rotate it slightly, you'll be able to see. This is readily available and it is a form of hardwood. So this is the loading blank that goes into the machine. Then after that it is proffered to the cutting tools, which are shown here. As you can see, it is quite a detailed profile, and there has to be a clearance angle ground on the back to make it into a cutting surface. So as we can see, there is our cutting tool. Now if I get this particular cutting tool and offer it up to the moulding that it actually cuts, we can see there that it fits directly in to the moulding. So remember that this cutter is rotating round very fast, and as it comes into contact with the wood, it takes a circular cut and returns for another rotation, at which time the lead screw has moved the wood section further forward, ready for the next cut. Now these particular cutting tools are made of silver steel, which is a very good quality steel, which they make screwdrivers from, and it can be toughened or hardened, which are two very different processes. Now a material like this needs to be tough. The difference between tough and hard is hard can be brittle, so a tool could break or snap if it is just too hard. Tough, on the other hand, has a certain amount of hardness, but it is also resilient enough not to snap. Now, this is a very specialised subject. Silver steel is a material that can be hardened and toughened. So this comes in 12-inch lengths for making screwdrivers, really, or something similar. Now, what I did is to heat it up to a red heat and hammer it flat to make something resembling a screwdriver end. Before I did that, I actually bent the length into a right angle. Then I heated and flattened the surface and made it into the base for the cutting tool. Then, using a great deal of dexterity and also some very small watchmaker's files, I cut the profile exactly that I wanted, making sure that I cut at an angle so it gives the tool a clearance at the back and gives it a far sharper edge. Then after that, once I was happy with how sharp it was and how the tool was looking, I made sure it was polished and very sharp. Then I heated it up, and I am very much an amateur at all of this stuff. I heated it up until the coloured bands that seem to appear on steel when heated had got to the right colour and space. Then I dropped the whole assembly into water, which quenched it. That made the material tough. Not too tough that it was hard and likely to shatter. No, tough. That is a bit of a judgment call and a bit of guesswork. You can just see the clearance angle inside the cutter. Now, I will show you my array of cutters. These are all the cutting tools that I made at the time, so there are quite a few for quite a large varied amount of wood mouldings. Now, if I zoom in on these gently, you can see all the shapes that I made. They all take quite some time to make, although the results actually come out very well indeed. So this really is a fly cutting machine, which is for making mouldings out of wood, primarily for miniature houses, dolls' houses, or, as in this case, Ferndale Manor. I thought that you might like to see my crazy system. I'll have a go at more or less anything. That's why they call me Eccentric Stephanie, or Nutty Stephanie. Well, that's about it as far as this machine is concerned. I hope you enjoyed my little bit of fun. A variation on the fly cutting idea was this piece here. There is a set screw to hold in place the cutting tool, which is there, and again the cutting tool has got a clearance angle and a sharp edge, which was used to make things as sharp as possible. There is also a screw hole there for a piece to be fitted in the bottom, which could be a pilot drill or some form of steady. So that again could be placed in the chuck of the drilling machine. and it rotates in that direction at great speed as the wood is fed past it. So there is that device. Now this other one is for making the attractive round mouldings at the top corners of the doors in Ferndale Manor. Now as you can see, it is still set to that particular purpose. If I can zoom it in, you can see. Now remember, this actually mounts vertical in the pillar drill like that and rotates around at a very fast speed. Now what happens is there is a rectangle of wood screwed down onto a plate held in the jaws of the table, and as this rotates around and is lowered down onto the piece of wood, the rotating cutting surface cuts concentric circles on the piece of wood. The radius of the circles can be adjusted by moving the tool at this angle in and out. Now once the circles have been cut and all would appear to be well, then it's time to remove the blank piece of wood from the chuck and cut it out after the concentric circles have been cut. This way it can make light work of it should something happen or go wrong. And also it is very, very important to keep the wood that you are cutting extremely soundly in position. So this is a safety issue, and any equipment like this must be treated with a great deal of respect and knowledge. It is not something to be taken lightly, as these cutting tools are very sharp, very fast, and would have no problem ripping hair out and removing fingers. So really, extreme caution. I've been very lucky over the years, but then again I have been doing all this sorts of things for at least 48 years. One day maybe I will get caught. Well, that's that bit. So you've seen all my fly cutting tools. Just before you go, I thought that you might like to see this little clamp that I made many years ago. It has served me very well for small tiny jobs. It is only about 25 millimeters in length with a 2BA screw. I also made the little wing nut that goes on the top. Now when I made it, it was all beautifully shiny and I took great care of it. As you can see, it's seen a reasonable amount of service now, but it's still going very strong. The wing nut is soldered into the head of the screw. This is another little dalliance of Eccentric Stephanie. Thank you.